Welcome back, everyone, to another installment of Introduction to Insect Taxonomy and Identification. Please like and subscribe. It helps the channel a lot. I like talking to you all in the comments if you have any questions or just thoughts about insect groups that you want to cover. At this point, I'm kind of jumping around, talking about whatever I want, because it's my channel. And today I wanted to continue talking about some of the aquatic beetles, because I really like the aquatic beetles. I like going out and collecting them. I like doing identification of them. And today I wanted to talk about the Haliplids, which are a very primitive group of aquatic beetles. There's not too many of them. They're kind of beginner friendly if you're nervous about doing any sort of identifications yourselves, although you will probably need at least a lens for identification or a low-powered microscope, because the Haliplids can be very small. Some of the adults are only like 1 millimeter, 1.5 millimeters, something like that. And some of them are larger, but if you do get some of the small ones, you're definitely going to need a little help with the lens unless you have really good vision. But they are fun to collect. They're pretty easy to collect for a water beetle. They tend to hang out in the shallows and on the edges of streams and ponds and things like that. So you don't have to go to like deep water in the lakes or anything. They tend to just be down in the gravel, stuff like that. So any sort of kick net or D-frame nets, anything like that, or even doing it with your hands, just like getting a pan and dredging up a bunch of gravel and picking through it, you can probably find them. They're not particularly fast. They're pretty clumsy in the water, so they're kind of fun to collect. And like I said, they're not hard to identify. There's not too many of them. So once you can get a good look at them with like a lens or something, and going through what I'm going to tell you here, you should be able to do a genus level ID pretty easily. And then you'll need some more materials to be able to do a species ID. But even then, there aren't a ton of species. This isn't like talking about weevils where there's millions of species or something. There's double-digit species in the U.S. So the Haliplids, if you watch the last one I did on the Gyrinids, the Haliplids are a cousin group. They're adepigans, so these are beetles. So where am I? There I am. So they're beetles. So they have an elytra. The external set of wings. The first set of wings are hardened into a protective shell, and then they have the membranous wings underneath. They are adepigans. So these are in the same group as the Dyticid water beetles, the Notarids, the Gyrinids, stuff like that. They're all pretty closely related. They're primitive beetles. They tend to be carnivorous. And there's generally the adepigan groups aren't super speciose. There's not a ton of species in them unless you're talking about the ground beetles. The other groups tend to be pretty limited in the number of species there are. And the Haliplids, at least in the US, there are 4 genera. Globally, there are maybe 5. So the genetics of this and the cladistics of this, there's a couple different authors that say different things. But in the US, we have 4. We have Peltodytes, Brychius, Haliplus, and we have Apteraliplus. Algophilus is just, as far as I know, it's still its own genus, and it's African. So you're not going to find this in North America if you're looking. But basically everywhere else, you probably have these 4. Haliplus is pretty common. Peltodytes is pretty common. These other ones, Brychius and Apteraliplus, not as common in my experience. It's these other 2, Peltodytes and Haliplus, that you're going to find. Both of these here, these down here, the African genus and the Apteraliplus, these are flightless. So they generally have either no wings or shrunken wings. So that is kind of something that gives them away immediately, that, oh, this is a different kind of haliplid. But haliplids are generally pretty easy to immediately identify. Even though they're very small, you will be able to tell that it's a haliplid almost immediately. One, they tend to be this sort of golden brown color. And sometimes they're bright yellow, but they tend to be like a golden brown. They tend to have black spots or black markings on them. The larvae are super variable, though. They're very long, and they frequently have some sort of projectile, some sort of long gills or long setae. Sometimes they're caudal gills, but they do tend to be a slightly variable. It's not always super easy to know what you're dealing with if you've never done kind of larval entomology. That's a whole other beast, dealing with larval identification. But they tend to be this very obvious gold color with black markings or black spots. And if you flip them over, they have a very obvious character, which are their metacoxy. These two things here, these giant lobes, are the basal segment of their back legs, and they're enormous. They're larger than basically any other beetle, and when you look at them, they basically form a continuous plate. So this whole section will be covered by these giant hind leg segments. And the structure of these hind leg segments can actually be used to tell you what genus you're dealing with. So this particular one is Peltodytes, and Peltodytes tends to cover up everything but this hind segment. So you can, because of how this specimen, I believe, has been preserved, it's probably a little expanded in the alcohol. You can kind of see the last two segments, but generally it's just this last segment that's visible. And on top of it, this plate here, if we zoom in on it, you can see it has a margin. So it's like the inner margin and the outer margin. And the outer margin is kind of marked like that. And that is unique to Peltodytes. So if you see that sort of margined, lacy metacoxa, so this is metacoxa, Coxa. This plate here is the metacoxa. If you see that sort of frilly, lacy look on the metacoxa, you immediately know it's Peltodytes. So other things that these guys have in common, so these are called the crawling water beetles. So this is a Haliplus, and they're called crawling water beetles. And the reason they're called crawling water beetles is because they're really bad at swimming. So there's like 67 species in the US. And like I said earlier, they're easy to collect because they're very clumsy in the water. They tend to hang out in the shallows. They tend to hang out in the sand and the gravel along the edge of ponds and stuff like that because they're really terrible at swimming. And they have evolved directly from terrestrial beetles. They didn't evolve from other aquatic beetles, so they came from the land and started inhabiting the water. And they never really got around to building specialized legs for the water. All they really did was kind of add some tibial and tarsal hairs that kind of helped them paddle along in the water. But if you've looked at like the Dytiscids I've talked about or the Gyrinids I've talked about, those other water beetles tend to have paddle feet. They tend to be shortened, they tend to be flat, they tend to be covered in hair, and they can really move through water. But the other thing those groups have in common is that they can synchronize their leg movements so that they can swim with both legs at the same time. These guys, the crawling water beetles, can't do that. They can only move one leg at a time, one hind leg at a time. So they're extremely clumsy. They're not making a concerted effort in one direction. They kind of zigzag. They're not very good at swimming. So they just kind of hang out in the shallows because they can't be trusted to do anything else. So they swim with this kind of alternating legs, usually really badly. So frequently they don't really swim very much. They have to swim to the surface to get more air, which they hold under their elytra. So this outer wing, change color here so it's a little easier to see. This outer wing is the elytra, right? And they can hold an air bubble underneath it. And then also those big metacoxal plates on their underside, on their stomach side, they can put air bubbles underneath there. And then they can breathe using those air bubbles. So they take their own little scuba tank with them. But they have to come to the surface, so they have to swim up to the surface at some point. But otherwise, they just kind of crawl around on the ground of the pond or the lake or the stream that they're in. So hence the name crawling water beetle. There can also be found some of these. So Peltodytes and Haliplus tend to be in these bigger water bodies. But then the Brychius and the Apteraliplus tend to be in other places. So they're either in mineral ponds or like temporary pools, things like that. So you have to know where you're looking to find some of these genera. The adults are carnivorous, like the other Adepticans. They have this kind of pronathous mouth that they can use to eat other insect eggs or hydrozoa, which are like the hydra. And then occasionally they'll eat some algae. But the larvae, those weird looking long larvae, these guys here, are entirely herbivores. They only eat algae. So sometimes the adults will actually lay their eggs in the stems of either algae plants or like grasses and stuff. And the eggs will hatch inside the stems and the larvae can just eat the plants right there. Otherwise, they deposit their eggs just like on the surface of plants, stuff like that. And then they'll overwinter sometimes like that. Sometimes the adults overwinter in frozen ponds, but the pupation always occurs on land. So the larvae will crawl out of the water to pupate. They'll pupate in the mud. And then once they become adults, they will crawl back into the water. So one of the nice things about like these old drawings is they show you these life stages, but they also show you, so this would be like the pupa, but they also show you like the various mouth parts and the legs and stuff. So you have something like, let's go to this one. This is the labrum. This is the mandible. This is the maxilla. This is the antenna. This is the labium. This is the vertex, the top of the head. So you can actually see all of the stuff dissected out. It's really nice. I really like these old plates. But anyway, some of these guys can fly really well. The ones in the United States tend to be able to fly really well, all but the one genus, Apteraliplus. But these other guys can all fly really well. So how do you tell them apart? So the first thing that you can look at is body shape. So you'll have one of two kind of basic body shapes. You'll either have this broadly ovoid, tapering sort of egg shape, or you will have what is usually called fusiform or spindle shape, where it's definitely kind of thinned and tapered at both ends, and you have this straighter area here. So this is called the pronotum, this here, and they will have parallel sides. If you have something that's this shape, it's Brychius. 100% of the time it's Brychius. And if you flip it over, there are some other characters of the underside of the sterna and stuff like that. But if you see this shape, where you have this spindle-shaped sort of body and you have this parallel-sided pronotum, you have Brychius. Versus something like this, which is much more egg-shaped. The pronotum has these, like, it's like this trapezoid sort of shaped pronotum, trapezoid pentagon pronotum. Then you have something else. So immediately off the bat, if you have something that's this shape, you know you have a Brychius. So both of these are Brychius. You can see these are actually the same species, Brychius elevatus. But you can see there's some differences in the patterning and the coloration. That doesn't really matter. It's just the shape that you're looking for here. Next, so let's say that you have something that's closer to this shape, or this shape, where you have the broad trapezoidal pronotum here. You have these broad, they're facing out instead of facing straight back. And you have this very broad oval shape for the whole body, kind of seed-shaped. So you have something else. The first thing that you should look at is flip it over and look at those coxae on the underside. If you, like I said before, if you have this margined coxa, where there's an inner margin and an outer margin, and it has this kind of lacy structure, you have Peltodytes. If you don't have that structure, then you have something else. Generally on Peltodytes, you also can only see this last abdominal segment on the underside. This specimen here doesn't show it very well because I suspect it's been in alcohol too long and it's kind of swollen, the membranes have swollen. But if you've never been to this website, there's a website called microinvertebrates.org that has pictures of a lot of this stuff. And this is what a Peltodytes metacoxa looks like, where it is supposed to look like. where it's just this last segment that's visible and everything else is covered. So this one doesn't do it as well, but there's kind of benefits to looking at some of this stuff in water because some of their features show up better. On that other one, you can't see this sort of fringy, lacy margin as well. So sometimes looking at them in alcohol or in water, you can see more stuff. The other thing that you should look at if you want to know what you have next is the presence or absence of spots on the back of the pronotum. If you see two spots here, I'll zoom in here, you'll see that there's two spots at the base of the pronotum, one here, one here. And we'll look at another Peltodytes species. You see one here and here. Peltodytes always has those two spots. So it'll have the lacy, super enlarged metacoxa that blocks everything but the last abdominal segment, and we'll have those two spots right there. And with that, you can be sure that it's a Peltodytes. If it doesn't have those spots, and if 3 or more segments are visible on the underside, then you have one of these other things. You either have Haliplus or Apteraliplus if you're in the United States. So Apteraliplus is the easiest one to identify. It's very, very small. It tends to have a little divot in the back right there. It is missing those spots, and it is flightless. So if you peel these elytra back, instead of finding large membranous wings, you will either find no wings or you'll just find little tattered, undeveloped winglets, if you will. So if it doesn't have wings, then you have Apteraliplus. If it has wings and it's none of these other things that you've seen, then it is Haliplus. And there are a lot of Haliplus. So Haliplus are these ones that I've been showing you. They have this very seed-shaped body. Their metacoxa is large, but it's not as big as Peltodytes. It doesn't have that kind of lacy fringe. It doesn't obscure the entire abdomen. But it does, because there are a lot of species of this, they do come with a couple of different patterns. So if you see here, this is the Haliplus of the underside of the Haliplus that I was talking about. Here are those metacoxal plates, and you can see more of the abdominal segments here. So you have like 4 here, as opposed to just being able to see 1 or 2 at the very end. So immediately you know it's not Peltodytes. It doesn't have those spots, and those spots on the pronotum. If we turn this over, there's no spotting here, so definitely not Peltodytes. And it has wings. You'll just have to trust me on that one. So it's not Apteraliplus, and it doesn't have this shape like Brychius. It doesn't have these these straight-sided pronota. It doesn't have this very tapering, this hard tapering, this spindle-shaped sort of body. So you know it's Haliplus. Haliplus comes in a lot of different forms. This is a terrible, whoever preserved this specimen did a very terrible job. But they come with also different patterns. Haliplus has a lot of different patterns. If you look at the keys for Haliplus, you will need to be able to see the pattern. So hopefully you picked up one where the pattern hasn't been destroyed for some reason. But like this shape here tends to be really diagnostic, like this. Black patterning here. This is Haliplus variegatus, so it's the variegated Haliplus. And these spots on this species tend to be in the same spot. So you have, or they don't move. You'll have like these candy cane shaped spots. You'll have this weird arrowhead shaped spot. Those tend to be fixed in a lot of the Haliplus. So if you're looking at a key for this particular genus, you'll want to be able to see this. So for this one, for instance, this is Haliplus fulvus. And it has a different pattern than this Haliplus variegatus. So they're both the same genus, but they're obviously different species. Here's another one, Haliplus obliquus. This one is fairly common. I found let's just say it's common when I look for them, or in the times that I've looked for them. And instead of spots, it has these long stripes. So they're actually very easy to identify. And that's it. Those are the only 4 genera in the US, or actually the only 4 genera in North America. And generally, if you are looking in your ponds or streams or something, you're either going to find Peltodytes or you're going to find Haliplus. The other two are pretty rare. You're going to have to look in other spots, mineral ponds, mineral springs, snow melt, things like that. If you're actually looking at standing bodies of water, it's either going to be Peltodytes or Haliplus. And that's it. This is such a beginner-friendly group. They're so fun, so easy to collect. Just get yourself a good magnifying glass. You don't even need a microscope. If you've got a good like 10x lens, you'll be able to see all of these structures. It's just so user-friendly, so newbie-friendly, really. And with that, that's it for the Haliplids. Who knows what I'll talk about next? Maybe the Notarids or the Dyticids or something like that. And I'll talk to you guys later. Please like and subscribe. See you guys later.